Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is November 1st. I'm Howie Marlin, and this is Addiction. Got a minute? Well, welcome back, everybody. Fall is in the air, that's for sure. Yesterday, Halloween. I don't know about you, but we have a very large sectioned off area of our town for the kids to trick-or-treat, and what a party it was. It's funny. Normally, year after year, I have a little bit of a little station. I was in college. I was a monster at a local haunted mansion, and I grew so accustomed, and I love the whole Halloween thing. So knowing outfits and ways to engage people in ways that won't result in you getting kicked. Every year, I tend to be a ghoul in some sort of stage setting, but we didn't do it this year. Too many things going on. Well, anyway, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And today I am joined by my new best friend, Patricia Pike. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Howie. How are you?
There you are. Wonderful. Very good. I met Patty at the AIS conference last week, and Patty's on the board. So let me just jump in. Patty, why don't you say hi, who you are, where you're from, what you do. You go for long walks on the beach and stuff like that. And tell us a little bit about AIS.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Howie. So my name is Patty Pike. I'm Patricia. My mother is the only person that actually calls me Patricia. She used to do that when she was get angry with me. So I call myself Patty. And I'm with Can-Am Intervention Services, and I'm an interventionist addiction specialist. And that's right, Howie. I am the on the AIS board, and we had a great time there last week, and it was wonderful to meet you. And I'm really inspired by what you're doing and your podcast, and still trying to figure out how to kind of come together with you and see what we can do here.
Well, we're good. This is really what it's all about. It doesn't take any more than that. It's you were the very first person I met, I believe, when I walked into the backyard of the hotel for the gathering, and it was interesting. I told a number of people that this was really interesting in a number of ways. I've been involved in so many industries. For the folks who have been following my antics over the years, and the podcasts that I have in aviation, I've been in television and software and motorsports, and I have gotten very accustomed to engaging new groups of people. And so meeting new people is fairly, common to me. This was a very unnormal group of people. Warm, really friendly, really engaging. And it seemed everybody really wanted to know what everybody did. Now, those of you that know each other from before, of course, you've already done that. But for me, being a newbie, walking around, people were thrilled. And it was very empowering to be among folks who felt very comfortable. Now, consider the nature of the business that we're in.
Right.
We're cut from a different cloth. Now, one of the jokes during the conference, one of the presenters made a reference to the type of individuals who are drawn to this business. Tell me, how would you describe the type of individual drawn to being an interventionist?
Well, that's a really tough question because, first of all, I remember when I met you, in the backyard, and I went up and I gave you a big hug, and, and you were like, wow, I even get a hug. And that was really awesome, to give you a hug. And then I realized that you were really new, and that was your first AIS. And I remembered back when I went to my first AIS conference in Palm Springs 8 years ago, or actually my first one was in New Orleans, pardon me. And so, I went to New Orleans, and it was my first one. And I remember just feeling like kind of awkward. And it was just like, you were just such an easy person to talk to. And you sort of like had that connection, that connection that interventionist kind of has. and which is like a really special kind of feeling for me as an interventionist, because I was not one of those people that planned to be an addiction specialist or working in the helping field or working as a professional or being an interventionist. It was not really something that I sort of sat down and plotted and planned to do. That was not, it sort of got put in front of me, and and I took the steps that I needed to take in the moment, and I ended up being the person I am today. And I was thinking also about the people that are interventionists and that are at AIS, and it's really interesting because there's a lot of people that I know that have worked in the field and I've come across in the last 8 years that I've been an interventionist that has been really inspired by what I do.
Hmm.
And I know, and even with my trainings, with my intervention trainings that I facilitate, that I have been for the last 4 years, there's a lot of people that will come to those trainings and they really want to be an interventionist. But I know intuitively some of those folks are just not going to be an interventionist. And at the AIS, and what the question that you brought up about, like, people that are interventionists that are working in that field, and the people that were there last week, there's a lot of people there that are interventionists that that have been interventionists for a long period of time. It's sort of like they have that gift. They have that gift that I was given. I believe that I was given this gift,
Well,
to
let,
be able to help other people.
what kind of personality would you say would?
It's very interesting because it's sort of like someone that has an intuition, a very kind of a strong intuition, laid back, sort of positive, not, I mean, positive presentation, but a very peaceful, patient, um, but also very talented in their professional skills, because I think that someone that wants to, or someone that's, I can only speak for myself and the people that I've known that I've met in the last 8 years that are
Mhm.
very seasoned interventionists and have been around for a lot longer than I have. One of the qualities that I see is their patience and their level of connection with other people and their level to just give that person the opportunity to tell their story. And I think that that's probably what you felt, that's my sense at the AIS conference last week, is that people were interested in your story. They were interested in how you got to that place of coming to, being an interventionist or working towards that.
Well, that's very observant. And one of the things which really I found fascinating, I got the feeling people were centered. In other words, um, they seemed to not be distracted by things around them. Um, don't get me wrong, I've met and talked with plenty of people who are able to engage in conversation and stay with you in that space. But it seemed that there was a very common denominator of a style of engagement. And I guess, we're hunting around that, and maybe we'll talk more about that later, because there certainly is a different kind of personality to do this. You're meeting new people
Right,
in who are themselves dysregulated because of the crisis that they're in. And
right,
in crises, people tend to act in for us now, you and I, very familiar ways. My working out of the crisis center, our hospital emergency department, and seeing people in the midst of emergent crises. You get the interventionist who is brought to a family, a group, or an individual who presents to you, the interventionist, a state of affairs in need of, in dire straits, in need of immediate guidance, supervision, motivation, uh, you know, to utilize a whole toolkit of skills. One of the things that I learned at the session was how many different types of individuals do this work. There are
Right.
folks who have been sober for a year. They get motivated and excited about their sobriety, and they want to help other people, and so they rush out and they want to engage and convince and then help them get treatment. They call themselves interventionists, and by the fact they are intervening, by definition, it's true. But the professional interventionist is quite a bit different. You know, you and I can play tennis, and we can
Right.
have a good game. But then if you're a professional tennis player and you meet me on the court, you are going to have moves I wouldn't know how to return a serve. I wouldn't know how to deal with the manner in which you do it. So in
Right.
one sense, do they intervene? They do. But do they have the skills of the professional? Not at all. And AIS was created to do what specifically? And you know what I'm getting at.
Right. Well, really, AIS was really created to bring a body of people together where there could be some professionalism and to kind of raise the bar, raise the bar of professionalism, and also, to have a place so, people that have a specialist, I consider myself as a specialist in addiction, just because of the years I have worked in the field of mental health and addiction. And I think that as an interventionist going into that world, there's a there's there's something special about that. Like, there's a specialist. It's sort of like I always kind of try and describe it to families. You're looking at, because they think, I might get a call from a family and they might say, "Oh, what is an interventionist?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of like you're a specialist in addiction and behaviors that relate it to addictions. And there are some specialty interventionists that focus more on mental health and trauma, and I really do as well. But I really try and present myself as an addiction specialist and an intervention specialist, much like a doctor. A doctor that does has a specialty in kidney disease. If you went to a doctor and you said, "Look," just a regular doctor, and said, "Look, I've got some really terrible things going on with my dialysis," that doctor is not really going to know how to deal with dialysis because they're not trained in that. An interventionist is very much trained. They have a lot of skills that are related to, resistant people, dealing with resistance, dealing with people that are in denial, dealing and breaking down that cycle of denial, and figuring out like how to actually to do that in a very short period of time, and not just working with the identified patient, but also working with the family. So when AIS sort of formulated, I don't know how many years ago, I think it was 20 or so, and Becky Flood, I think she was one of the first chairpersons, which she got honored last week for all the work that she has done with AIS, as well as building AIS to what it is today. And the foundation really is raising the bar of professionalism in the intervention world, because we want people to be trained. We want people to be certified. We don't want that person that is, finished their first year of recovery and feel inspired to go and help other people. That's a positive thing. But it's very important that an interventionist has some credentials, a master's level, a bachelor's, an AA degree in addiction studies, that's got some experience of working in the field, that have been able to practice some of those skills of rolling with resistance, motivational interviewing, and, addiction 12-step model, trauma, addiction, attachment and trauma issues, mental health diagnoses clients, learning what your niche is, and figuring out when you take on a case, are you going to, as a professional interventionist, can you take on that case, knowing that you can go and work with a family maybe of 10 people, and you are going to be able to facilitate that, intervention case.
You've touched on a number of really good and really important things. Let me take a quick break here. We will be back with Patty Pike in just a minute.
So I went on too long. That's okay.
Okay, we're back. That's pretty funny. Yeah, Patty just jumped in, and it's funny because she recognized that we can tend to ramble. We'll go from one subject to another, and the thing is, there's so much to talk about, and it's all good. And don't worry about it. Listen, if you get really rocking, I'll just either move on to something else, or I'll just jump right in. But
All right.
Patty,
Sounds
where can people get more information about you before we go too far? What's your website?
Yeah, so my website is www.canaminterventions.com. And that really stands for Canada American, because I'm an international interventionist. So I facilitate interventions both in Canada and the United States.
Yeah, we forgot to say you're on the West Coast, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm in San Francisco Bay Area. I have an office here, and then I also have an office up in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Well, but that makes it kind of convenient. We'll talk about what's going on in Canada at another time, because I get the feeling that's the subject for an entire show. There's so many things changing. Of course, the great state of cannabis. The jokes aside, we can tell you here, of course, you being in San Francisco, in California, Massachusetts, where I am, has just made very aggressive moves with the legalization of social engagement with pot, with cannabis,
right.
So there's all sorts of things here, and it's funny because a whole new world of issues have raised its heads. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Getting back to the nature of AIS and the folks that were there, one of the interesting things that caught my attention immediately was the turnabout in the way that when you go to a trade show, you normally have trade show booths with folks trying to sell you things. And then you go to the conferences, and the subject matter of the conferences are educational, associated with, of course, and focused on the kind of people and products that are in the trade show. But for this event, the discussion panel, were the vendors. And
right.
These were various treatment centers. I take it that's very much by design. And who came up with that idea?
I think AIS sort of really wanted to focus on, well, first of all, AIS is really, funded through the members. And, and part of the membership, part of, being a member, it's really important to be educated on the various treatment programs that are out there in the United States and Canada. And so I think that the goal was, I don't really know who came up with this specific guideline, but the goal was to have various treatment programs come in and present to give a sort of sense of, of types of treatments that are out there. And so interventionists could actually build relationships with those treatment programs. And it's worked out really well. And I think that this one had the most treatment programs, the one that we went to in
Really?
Clearwater. Yeah, that one had, I think, 9 or 10. And because AI... Mm-hmm.
No, no. I'm talking to Patty on Skype, and when the fact that we had um, 9 different facilities. Now, the cool thing was they got to talk about their facility in general. They made their presentation. They made their sales pitch to all of us. But then afterwards, we got to talk with them individually and get to know them. Um,
Right,
it seemed all the facilities that were brought in were truly advanced. They're really well developed. These are
right,
facilities that have been around for a while, have a
right,
track record, and they all had added value in one way or another. Um,
right.
so it was very comforting because as I was talking with Patty before the show, we met one person in particular who has a facility in California, and it's a certain style of treatment. The thing I want to talk about now with you, Patty, is the amount of time and effort that you put into matching the right facility to the individual.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just to kind of finish off, those nine programs that were at
Sure.
the AIS last week, I think that each one, and it's to me, it definitely has gotten better in terms of, that it wasn't just a sales pitch. It was like the programs were, bringing in their top level professionals, doctors, psychiatrists. So there was an array of very talented, smart folks that have done a lot of research and been able to facilitate some of the newer sort of processes for addiction and trauma and mental health. And I think that that's one of the biggest changes that I have seen, with the AIS. I think that they've gotten bigger, they've gotten better. And I think that with that, I'm it was really overwhelmingly positive for me as a AIS member, as an interventionist. Yeah, to answer your question regarding the putting the time and effort into finding the right treatment program for an
Yes.
untreated patient, that is a huge part of an intervention, because there's a couple factors. Well, there's numerous, but I think that the first factor really is, having a very clear understanding of the family system, and also facilitating a fairly good assessment with the family. And also, if it is a surprise approach intervention, really trying to assess the untreated individual through the family, looking at their mental health, looking at the emotional issues, looking at the addiction, looking at a lot of factors, and what is the drug of choice, what is the age, if there's insurance, if it's a private pay. All those things are things that I think about when I'm trying to place someone into treatment. So those are really the things that I focus on. Is trying to figure out from the family system, what is really going on, and also definitely always wanting to have a family program for a treatment program.
Well, I like the family treatment is absolutely pervasive. There's no two ways about it. You need to look at the family systems. For folks that tend to skip over that, I'm sure there are reasons, and we might want to touch on that at a later time. It's always been my contention that there's hardly a substance use disorder or issue at hand without a mental health component, and there's hardly ever an event when it comes to someone's dysregulation or mental stability which isn't directly tied into the culture of the family. So a lot of times when you start looking at the dynamics of the family, you can see why the severity of someone's condition has caused so much strife. It's not to say that, that all families, we are all messed up. We're human. Every family has their
Right.
issues.
Yeah.
Some families are able to encourage healthy conversation, healthy resolution to conflict. They have alternatives at the ready, and there are people who take various roles in the family, which makes it strong and are able to
Right.
overcome the conflicts. And then there are families where strife, trauma, things have happened, and
Right.
it's just more difficult for them. So looking at the
Right.
family dynamics, we can then work with therapists, of which I'm one, but work with therapists with the family so that when the client returns back to the environment from which they came, the structure is now more focused on healthy communication,
Right.
mannerisms, procedures. Um,
Right. Right.
so we'll talk about that later because at another show, because that again is really that it is tremendously important. So one of the things that I learned in placing people was trying to match the energy of the individual with the energy of the facility.
Right.
There's a place here in New England, which I love to talk about, called Right Turn. It's run by Woody
Oh, right.
Giesman, of course,
Hmm.
Woody, who is very involved with AIS.
Sure.
It's a creativity based facility. Of
Hmm.
course, it lends itself to music. They do have Saturday night open houses. They have open mic. They've got drum set sitting there, and people play music. They read poetry. They show their art, their whether it be graphics, painting, drawing. Woody, by I just don't mind saying, is a phenomenal artist to his own right. And so that's the nature of that particular facility. There's
Right.
equine treatment facilities, and then there's places which are in the mountains or in the fields or on an island or in a city, to match the culture of the individual. Um,
Sure.
I'm not going to send a guy like Eminem to the same place. I'm going to send Mrs. Peel,
Right.
right? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that's something else to be concerned about. So,
Yeah,
you know,
matching clients to treatment is it's very it's very important. And I've referred thousands of people to various treatment programs all over United States and Canada. And I really look at, I look at the family history just because I need to look at the patterns. I need to look at the patterns in the family so I can also not just make that determination based on substance use, or mental health, but it's really trying to find out, okay, we've got an entitled person, for instance, or if we've got someone that, is a business guy, or I need to try and match that client to a program. Maybe that person may have to continue to work on their business while they're in treatment, or and maybe it is a musician that needs to, be in touch with their, their band or writing music, or maybe it might be, a teacher, that has to be finished their treatment in 30 days, because they need to get back to school because they can't take any more time off. To match the person just because of substance, mental health, and trauma is definitely a huge part of that as well.
there's so many things to look at. There's so many things to look at. There's so many angles to address the needs of the individual and how best that they can be served. I'm going to take a little break right now, and we'll be back in just 30 seconds. And we'll talk more about that with my guest today, Patty Pike. And like I said, we'll be back in a moment. Okay, hi everybody. Picking up at the half hour. Here I am again with Patty Pike. You're an LAADC, a CAADC too, a ICADC, and a CIP,
Yeah.
MICKEYMOUSC.
Yes, I do have all. I'll accept that. Yes. Yeah, I have all of those letters.
All of them and more.
Yeah.
Well, that's why. Now, how you said you dealt with you when you said you placed thousands of people, my jaw dropped. I impress myself when I say I've placed dozens of people. I
Right.
mean, it just shows how much in need this this industry is. Tell me, when did you start? How did you get into it?
I this is my 26 years of working as a professional. Yeah, I know. It's a
26
long
years.
time. 26 years. Yeah, I've been working in this field 26 years. And, really, I decided I needed to do something. I'm actually in recovery. I got 27 years, coming up to 27 years in November 23rd.
Hey,
And, I'd never been in recovery before. I'd never been in a treatment program before. It was my first time. And I heard everything that I needed to hear in order for me to continue the way that I'm living today. When I started, I decided to go to school to take a basic counseling course in Vancouver, British Columbia. And the only reason why I did that, because it was a prerequisite for a lot of the courses that I was interested in. My goal really was to maybe get into physiotherapy, just because I've been an athlete most of my life, and long distance runner, marathon runner. And I just was very interested in that side of things, kinesiology and all that. So I took this class and 2 years later I had finished, 2 years when I took one class and another one. And next thing I know, I'd done a 2 year addiction studies program that I had graduated from. And I got hired through the College of Physicians and Surgeons up in Vancouver. And I started working with research doctors up in Vancouver back in the early 90s.
ah,
And there was a lot of people dying from heroin overdoses at that time. And there was a lot of people dying from HIV and AIDS. And I started to work with these doctors. And that's kind of where I started, really. And I really didn't go down like the path of working in 12-step model or other models until later, until many, many years later. So kind of where I started.
that's amazing. The story of how people start is always fascinating. I mean, I hear of people coming in from literally every conceivable angle, but for you to be doing it for over 25 years is amazing. You know, people have this preconceived notion. Most folks, the only exposure they have to an intervention is what they see on TV, and
Right.
the show Intervention is based on. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the Johnson model,
Yes, it is. It's a Johnson model. It's mostly a surprise approach model.
which folks have feelings about, and I'm trained by Jeff and Deborah J, which
Right.
the love first angle, as the name implies, is a much more well. Why don't you tell me about the different styles of intervention that you're familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different styles. I mean, I love Jeff Day and Deborah's. I mean, I just love their energy. My goal is to actually take that training hopefully in June. Um, but the different styles of interventions that I'm familiar with is the Johnston model, which is the surprise approach model, and the invitation model, which is the family systemic model. And also, I mean, I've also taken Judith's training, the Arise model, which is really based on invitational and more of a long-term kind of process, more of a continuum of care process, which is a wonderful model as well.
Who's that?
Um, Judith Landau, she does the Arise intervention model.
Okay, well, it's the Arise intervention. I am seriously interested in pursuing that as well. Um, do you find the nature in which your engagements follow one discipline over another, or is it vary?
Well, it really varies on the family I'm working with. I like there are some interventionists that will only work with one model. I work with, I work with a lot of, like, I work with invitation, I work with surprise approach, and I really do come from a love first approach in my own sort of skills and my own abilities to really promote, connection. And definitely, I'm not a confrontational interventionist, and I don't particularly. I'm not that sort of, black and white sort of interventionist. So I think, like, even with the surprise approach model, I still bring in the family systemic approach where I am, facilitating a didactic education groups and seminars and videos and using genograms and really engaging the family in the education component of, helping them to sort of learn about addiction and mental health and trauma, and also looking at their own, family dynamics.
I'm sitting here with my head going up and down like a bobblehead doll because the family education is so critical. And
Right.
one of the things it's funny because I didn't get trained on it. I was exposed to people in crisis. I was doing my emergent care interventions. Then I started doing some longer involved interventions outside of the emergency department on my own. But for me, the philosophy is, as I said when I first opened the show, family is everything. It's everything in so many ways. And it's everything when it comes to helping the loved one return to an environment which is going to be supportive, which is going to be healthy, or, focused on improving and utilizing resources. Family members can be recovery coaches or recovery supporters, or family members can still be wrestling with their own addictions, but still be supportive of the loved one who is struggling so severely that it caused them such trauma that you were called in on. Well, that's one of the things we will talk about at another time, is the complexity of the family dynamics. I happen to just trip on one of the issues which is brought up often, and that's how to work with folks when in a family there's more than one person that are wrestling with issues of dependence. And my answer is, well, it's first of all, we're going to deal with one person at a time. And just because you are wrestling with an issue of dependence yourself doesn't mean you don't love that person any less. And you can learn from watching and doing. And there are plenty of stories, and I'm sure you've got, of other family members who got on the bandwagon of turning their lives around.
Right.
I hear that a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, it's very interesting because I kind of go into the intervention and try at, like, I think that the key piece is really assessing the family system. And because with that assessment, you can really understand where that system is coming from and try and figure out, like, what is the best treatment plan for this family. Even though the family may be more focused on the untreated individual that needs to get into a treatment program because they're killing themselves with alcohol or drugs or, suicide or whatever the issues are. But, to get that kind of foundation from the family system, you can sort of like figure out, like, how can you meet that family member, individually, but as a group as well. And if you have that red person that is the biggest red flag in the family system, you can try and support that person to get that person to join with the rest of the family members, and I think that, codependency and enabling and all those words they're very loosely used. And I always think, like, I'm very careful on not sort of using that language too much with families. But if I think it's important to go beyond that. Okay, what is it that's really making that person, stay in that place of denial? How can I break down that wall? And how can I make that kind of connection with that person that has that resistance to she may be that person or he may be that person that's going to keep that door open in order for me to not really get that person from the identified patient into treatment that day. So I have to really be careful to close that door.
it's an awkward position to be in, and it's one of those things where your skill set improves with time.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think in the beginning when I said, there's a special kind of folks that are interventionists, and you eloquently, said, yes, it's about that connection and that sort of, center, being really kind of client centered or, person centered. And it's true because, you have to have a lot of flexible skills. If you're kind of like one of those folks that just sort of have a one train thought, and you don't have like other professional skills, it doesn't mean that you're a bad interventionist. It just means that you may want to look at, okay, if you've got a really complex case, that might not be the case that you want to take on, because you may not have those types of skills, and I think that that's the key piece is to know what you can actually take on, because you're not doing therapy. You're working on a family system. You're doing a lot of group interaction, and you're really kind of trying to summarize, some issues and trying to bring everyone together so you can kind of get to that next step and break down that next wall.
very well said. And what's interesting is you talked about a couple of things, both the two things I want to point out, so important. Know thyself, to thyself be true, know your skills, know
Right?
what you can do well, know where it's best to call on someone else, maybe co-lead an
Right.
intervention or hand it off to someone else who's more
Absolutely.
prepared. Because the one thing you do not want to do is find yourself over your head.
Right.
One of the things which really struck me was how dynamically versatile the folks that I met came off to be. In other words, when I say versatile, I mean literally every single person came off with the ability to think on their feet, to be able to act under pressure, to be
Very well
mission
said.
centric,
Hmm.
be able to still soldier on, and to take all the sideshows that happen, address them, but still march forward. And after so many of these events under your belt, you, with experience, become really comfortable knowing that if a conflict arises, no, I'm good, I got this. And
Right.
when somebody's dysregulated, how to distract them, how to get other
Right.
family members to be supportive, encouraging, either to calm down or to redirect. So you can look into your group, your family, your team, and you know who to call on. The matriarch of the family, that the loved one will drop and give 50 if
That's
that
right.
person asks, and the brother who he hates, who is going to throw fire on anything and everything, and he should be minimized, or not minimized as far as an individual, but to turn the volume down so it doesn't impact the engagement in a negative way.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's very important to be able to change gears. As an interventionist, you really have to know how to change gears. And I mean, there's no other simple way to really put it. That's why I believe that as an interventionist, you really do need to be a specialist in what you're doing. And if you, as an interventionist, is starting off and you're trying to, you've got some great education, great, professional background experience of working in the addiction and mental health field, I think that that's great. But, it's always important to kind of, maybe connect with another interventionist, or if you get an intervention case, hire someone to come with you. That if you're feeling, that it's too much, to actually engage another professional, it's a really positive thing. For the first 2 years that I worked as an interventionist and got into the field, I actually had a mentor, and I had a mentor, and I called that person every intervention case that I did, no matter where I was, in the middle of Alberta, Canada, it didn't matter. I would call and I would have an hour to 2 hour consultation with that interventionist while I was working on that case. And it helped me tremendously because it also took away from it gave me the moment to be a student where I could also learn, even though I had actually a lot more experience and education than the person that was consulting with me, but he had more experience in the intervention field that could give me the confidence and help me to sort of walk through the case. Where if I was in that moment of being overwhelmed because I had some resistance in the system, how I could actually walk through that with some support, and I'm really honored to be that person at AIS now, as a board member, that I'm in this kind of position to help the new members that are coming in, that I get to mentor those members or be at least part of mentoring those members.
Awesome. Very well said, and it certainly makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about mentoring and things like that in a little bit. We'll take one more break, then we'll come back for the last segment of the show. And so, folks, we'll be back in a minute. We're back. Okay, folks, I'm here with Patricia Pike. We call her Patty, and Patty is a professional interventionist, and we just came from the AIS conference, and we've been talking about that. Now, for the last few minutes, I want to talk about resources that we use. I'm very involved with the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, CCAR group in Connecticut, and I'm a certified recovery coach, and I'm a certified recovery coach for the ER, and I'm well on my way to my professional recovery coaching certification. Just actually need a little bit of a conference call to get that taken care of. It's interesting. My reason for doing this is very interesting because I am a licensed therapist. I specialize with drug and alcohol. And I am working towards certification as an interventionist. So I want to be a therapist and help people with their working through their issues and overcoming their issues directly as a clinician. I want to do the recovery coaching, the intervention itself, because I'm really good at motivating people, inspiring them to take action, and I don't just walk the walk. I don't just talk the talk of motivational interviewing. But the other thing is to be a recovery coach and to help people negotiate the landscape as they follow up on their treatment. So those three different roles. But there's also another specialization called sobriety escorts. And I met Jamie and Jay. And have you employed sobriety escorts in the past?
No, I haven't. And I just met Jamie and I just met Jay at the conference last week, but I met Jamie at I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, but I definitely haven't used them. But they're very well known all over the country.
So you'll take people yourself. This is what you're saying?
Well, it really depends. I think in the beginning I did, I definitely, after the intervention is completed, the goal is to actually take the person directly from the intervention meeting to treatment, to transport them directly to treatment. And I still do at times. It just really depends on the individual that I'm dealing with, because a lot of the times, and sometimes, families feel very connected to me, or the patient, the untreated person makes a connection with me. And so sometimes with that severe attachment or a frozen fear that they have of taking those next steps, it's very difficult to engage another person. So I sometimes will assess that and take them myself. But in many cases, I have a transport support person that will transport, various folks into a treatment program, and in some cases flying to Texas or flying to LA or wherever the treatment program is located.
Well, it's funny because I've found that the facilities I've been working with, many of them around me here in New England, will arrange for transportation. So they'll come down and pick people up. I found it really beneficial for me to spend time with the client and to help in this cognitive restructuring, looking at their life the way it was and how it can be. And it's funny because I do use it as a therapeutic environment. At that time, I'm not officially their therapist, and I don't have structured plans or anything like that. But I help them come to terms with the way things are today, and to be able to plant terms that they can use to refer in discussion, in group and individual therapy while they're in treatment, and help them identify a path to pursue so that as they go down that path, they can check off all the bucket list items, the to-do items, and I cover them so that by the time they're done with their treatment, they have checked off, whether it be, some of the 12-step elements, making right, giving, paying back, paying forward, things like that. But anyway, that's interesting. The whole recovery coach, sober companion, sober transport thing opens up a discussion for an entire another show, and probably will have, if not Rick Parrish or Jamie or
yeah, that'd be great.
Have them on the show. So, folks, what I'm hoping to do is, if I haven't scared Patty to run away after this participation, that Patty will be joining me from here on as co-host. That's the official invite. Would you like to do that?
I would love to do that. I look forward to working with you and being part of this podcast. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to meet a lot of great people. And I think both of us together, we can, find out, get some good information out there to the communities.
Well, I appreciate that so very much. Probably the biggest thing I learned at AIS is the necessity for those of us in this community to be connected and to learn from each other, be able to use each other's resources and use us as resources, only helps everyone. And as our country changes from being absolutely innocent in its substance engagement, as was the early 60s, as I like to think, to the point where we got through to this phenomenally, I'll just use the word archaic, big pharma turning our country into addicts state, which we're in, to now acting on that and having physicians and pharmacies and treatment centers all be critically aware of how severely addictive these opiates are. And so in moving forward, doing things with, with healthy outcomes in our plans. Instead of just willy-nilly saying, here's a script for 60 and call me next month.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, we're running out of our allotted time. There is no allotted time. I just draw a line at an hour. And I'd like to give some shout-outs. And I just, as I give my shout-outs, Patty, you may have a couple that you'd like to. And first and foremost is Jeff. For me, is Jeff and Deborah J. I want to say hi to you guys. The training I went through a few months ago was eye-opening, to say the least. The friends that I made, my co-companions, Sue Donaldson, I want to give a big howdy-do to. And I gave her a ride to Orlando. I gave her a ride to Orlando on my way out of the conference, and the construction there, if any of you have been to Disneyland or Disney World recently, it took us a good 45 minutes just to get over there. So anyway, that was crazy. Woody Giesman, I want to say, hey, Woody. Woody is my mentor. He is the fellow I call Jeff, of course, I'm still using as a mentor from training, but Woody Giesman is my mentor overall to help with the progress of the interventions I'm doing. So I want to say a big howdy hey to him. And of course, Charlie Bentz from the Beach House in Malibu, who just really, I found dynamic as all get out. And I thank him for everything he does. And the list certainly will go on, but I'll stop from there. Anybody you want to say hi to in particular?
I would obviously want to shout out to Jeff. I mean, he was just amazing. I just loved his presentation. Charlie Bentz from Beach House Malibu, Dr. Harry from Beach House Malibu, Sue Donaldson. Really love Sue and her energy. And I think Ryan, what was his last name? Savo. I was just trying to look at it on my schedule here, but Ryan is from a program down in Florida, and I really, really enjoyed his talk on trauma and addiction and relational issues. He was great. Another big shout out to Emily Spencer. She was someone that came to my training down in Burbank. She's a new member, and she's a young adult, and I think that I can see big things for her. But there's so many other people, and Rebecca and Pat, and people that put on that the conference was just amazing. So anyway, it's just a great event, and of course to you, Howie, it was great to meet you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And we only go
Mark
from
Rose.
here.
I have to say Mark Rose. If I forget Mark Rose, that's it. You'll never talk to me again. Mark Rose from Seattle.
Okay. Well, on that note, Patty Pike, thank you very much. And Patty can be found at canaminterventions.com, CANAMINTERVENTIONS.com. And for Patty, this is Howie Marlin with Addiction Got a Minute. We'll see you next time. I've got a saying that describes my efforts. The best I can do is the best I can do, and I will. This brings us to the end of another episode of Addiction Got a Minute. I wish you warm breezes and clear sailing. Till next time, I'm Howie Marlin.